With journalists, it isn't necessarily about salary, it's the status that you get.
Yeah.
It's the aura that surrounds a journalist when he or she's in the room. Watch, consume as much news as possible, and ultimately they are running the affairs of the government as we stand. And there are critical reforms that are needed.
Why? Like, what's happening there? Like, why?
Because we need to mobilize, organize.
Imagine today was your last day.
I'm scared of death because I don't know if I'm going to do enough. I don't know what legacy I'm going to leave. The mainstream legacy, corporate media, does not see Arabs, Muslims and Palestinians as even humans. They see us as subhumans. We are just hordes of people that are coming to take over Europe and are becoming leeches and parasites on their economies.
Bashar al-Assad is sitting right here. What would you ask him?
The only thing I can ask him is, why didn't you stay and face the music? Have you understood what happened in Iraq? Did you understand how many people were killed in Iraq? And you ran away like a dog.
All right, Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, brother Dilly.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for inviting me to your studio. I believe I'm the second person that you've ever invited, so we feel honored to be here.
You're the second person in 5 years to be invited to our space to do a podcast on your show.
Amazing, alhamdulillah. So let's begin with my favorite question.
Which is,
what is your greatest fear?
my greatest fear is to go to Jahannam. And I say that with fear because going to Jannah or Jahannam, whilst we have husna dhan for Allah, and we believe that if you believed in Allah and the Messenger in the final day, that eventually you will end up in Jannah. But the fear of the akhirah is linked to the fear of death. So when you ask me what is my biggest fear, I can give you a religious answer, which is Jahannam. Really, it's actually death. I am scared of death. I'm scared of death because I don't know if I'm going to do enough. I don't know what legacy I'm going to leave. I don't know what sadaqah I'm going to leave. I don't know how my children will be when that time comes. All these things kind of are driven towards my fear of death, which then is the fear of where I'm going to end up and on which hand my book will be given to me.
We think, alhamdulillah, we've got long time to live. But imagine today was your last day. What would you be doing? Obviously, we certainly wouldn't be doing this podcast for sure.
Clearing any debts, ones that I know of and don't know of. Spending time with my parents, my mother especially, my wife, my children. Making a list of people that I've wronged and seeking their forgiveness profusely. Anyone in Jahiliyyah that I may have physically harmed, let them have their payback in this life, and trying to settle as many disputes as possible. In fact, I'd probably frantically, round the clock, be exhausting everything to right every wrong that I have, settle any debt that I have, and spend the concluding time before I pass with my family and my loved ones.
Wow. Thank you. Now, many people know you for various things. One of them being, the main one being journalism. blood brothers, 5 pillars, and that's how I came to know of you. I mean, I came to know of you from was it ITV or something, where you were with Muhammad Ali on a panel, and you were, mashallah, very fiery, and I was like, wow, who is this guy? And then I googled him up, and then it was Dilly Hussain from 5 pillars. But not many people know what you do apart from this. What do you do?
So when I'm not doing podcasts and I'm not doing work for 5 pillars, we have a family business, me and my older brother. I'm somewhat of a silent partner. We buy and sell cars. We've been trading cars for years, and it's just a kind of a hobby that we have. Of course, there's khidmah to the local community, my community in Bedford and the neighbouring town in Luton, whenever I'm needed to assist in any issues there. But other than that, I'm your average Joe Blog guy. I train, I do jiu-jitsu when I have some time. I used to train kids in the local boxing club. And that's me in a nutshell. I come from a very lovely neighbourhood in Bedford, predominantly Muslim. Bedford town itself is very multiracial, multicultural. I'm a boy of Bedford, born and raised. My father came there in 1966. I'm the second youngest of 6 siblings. My roots are in Sylhet, and that's who I am. So when I'm not doing podcasting and you're not seeing me on your screen, I'm in my town serving, living, surviving like everyone else.
And when did you guys start the car business?
So it's always like, it all started off as a hobby, just buying and selling from roadside, buying a few cars here and there. My older brother first began by trying to focus on niche vehicles. So, for example, accommodating for taxi drivers. So, Skoda Octavias, Skoda Fabias, Toyota Avensis, Toyota Priuses. So, looking at specific cars where we know that there's always going to be a need for them. Then I said to my brother that, look, we're going to have to kind of just, diversify our stock. We need to have everyday run-of-the-mill cars. We need to have Clios. We need to have Corsas. We need to have Astras. My brother was not always a fan of this. He was always like, look, I can trade cars comfortably with the market that I know and the product in question. My brother's also a huge fan of classic Japanese cars. So like Honda Prelude, Civic, Type Rs, VTECs, less so much Subaru Imprezas and Evolutions, but more so like the old school GTI, Toyota Corolla, twin cams, and all these kind of old Japanese cars, MR2s, which there is still a huge market for. So my brother always liked trading in cars, which he knew very well. I knew that there was always a niche market and a demand for. I was always of the position that we still need to have a run-of-the-mill car for that first-time passer. We need a run-of-the-mill car for someone's car who's broken down, but they need a car right now for the commute. They're not going to buy an MR2. They're not going to buy a Toyota Avensis. So I think when we got together, my brother has far more mechanical knowledge about vehicles, whereas I would prefer to deal with customers, speak with them. And before we had a lockup, before we had a site where we had vehicles, we used to bring these customers to our homes. And this was a wonderful opportunity to engage with people from all walks of life, Muslims and non-Muslims, giving dawah where we can in whichever way. I think when customers came to our home to purchase a vehicle, it gave them a sense of assurance that there's no way that these guys are going to rip us off. And even when we didn't have to necessarily give extended warranty, because they know they're buying these cars in the early stages, sold a seed on the roadside, but we still gave assurances and warranty. We still allowed people to come back if something went wrong with the vehicle, because this is what Islam teaches us. But in the same breath, Islam also teaches us that you have every right to exhaust all the time you wish to do your due diligence on this vehicle. You cannot say we do not let you do a test drive. You cannot tell us we did not allow you to start the car on a cold start. You cannot tell us that we didn't allow you to do everything. So do all the due diligence you need to. If you're happy, drive away with the car, but you cannot come back to us and say we mugged you over. So alhamdulillah, these are some of the founding principles that we had. We went from trading 3, 4, 5 cars. Alhamdulillah, we're now moving around with a stock of 20, 25. At the tops, we've had like 35, 40 cars. We also buy and sell cars with some of our trader friends. So I have many friends, brothers who are generally like Mirpuri, Pakistani. They're very big on the car trade business, as they are in the car hire business as well. So I will sometimes buy cars with them and leave it in their showroom. So for example, if you buy a 40 grand C63, no one's going to really buy that from the roadside, are they? It doesn't give them that confidence. So if we buy a high-net car, we put it in a showroom with one of the brothers who we have good ties with. If it's a car that's like under 5, 6, 7 grand, we're comfortable to sell it roadside. But my brother oversees all of that. I'm somewhat of a silent partner investor, and I'm there if needed.
How many brothers and sisters are you guys?
6 brothers and sisters, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. So Borafa, Mizafa, Bai, Sutafa, me, and my younger brother.
Okay, mashallah, mashallah. So, how did you get into journalism? How did that happen?
So I did a BA in politics, and when I was younger, the drive was actually my sisters. Both my sisters worked in the civil service. One of them holds still a very senior position in the civil service, immigration particularly. And I wanted to pursue that. I wanted to pursue law, because when I was young, I used to watch a lot of gangster movies. And one of the movies I watched was Carlito's Way. It was an old school hit Al Pacino movie. And he had this lawyer friend in the film called Kleinfeld. Kleinfeld was a Jewish lawyer. But Kleinfeld was an interesting character because he was one of the most sought after lawyers in New York in that movie. But he also had his hand and his feet dipped in the dark side. So he was a bit of a bad man. He had a say and a sway amongst the organized crime groups in New York. But at the same time, he was a respected and formidable lawyer in the movie. At the end, he got shot dead. So obviously I didn't want that. But there was this kind of there was this pursuit of achieving or attaining a career position which wouldn't compromise my roots. And my roots is that I am a working class lad from a working class family of immigrant descent. I can never get rid of that. Even when I speak and engage in debates on news channels or wherever it may be, some people say, Brother Dilly, after 12, 13 years, there's certain words and lingo that comes out that gives away. I'm not, alhamdulillah. I'm not here to pretend to be Mehdi Hassan. I'm not here to pretend that I was Oxbridge educated. I'm a lad from Bedford who, alhamdulillah, with the permission of Allah, have academic accolades. But my accent, my terminologies, my decorum is who I am. It's a part of who Dilly Hussain is. So in pursuit of that, I wanted to get into the civil service. Unfortunately, in my teens, I had certain run-ins with the law. So I ended up getting a criminal record, which then meant that I could never pursue a career in law or nor pursue a career in the civil service because they have very stringent CRB and DBS checks. So I passed my BA in politics with flying colours. I missed the first by 3 marks, didn't bother appealing it. And then I was kind of left a bit disillusioned. Like, okay, I've got my degree, threw the hat in the sky, taken the pictures. What now? And also keep in mind, I graduated in 2009. That was the year of the recession, the peak recession. Yep. 58% of all graduates were left either in unemployment or in a job that had nothing to do with the subject that they graduated in. So that was the year which I graduated. It was very difficult. I had a friend from Bedford who also accompanied me to the University of East Anglia. That's the university I went, UEA Norwich. And I said to him, his name is Dhul Kifl. I went, Kif, what are you doing, bruv? Because he graduated in BA in English. He's like, I'm gonna do a journalism course. I was like, really? He said, yeah. I was like, but is it like a step back, or is it like, does it still have the same stature and standing as a postgrad? He goes, yeah, it's like a postgraduate diploma, but you kind of need it as an accreditation to get into journalism. So I thought, okay, since my aspiration to become a lawyer and the civil service is now, it's out of the window, let's pursue journalism. Also, I looked into journalism and I realized that they don't have so stringent DBS checks and requirements. In fact, there are many journalists that have had colourful pasts, that have gone on to become well-known columnists and writers and editors. So yeah, I did my NCTJ course in No Sweat College of Journalism, which was an extension of the London School of Journalism. That was a 1-year course. It was a postgrad diploma. one of the caveats of doing this course was that I would have to be doing an active internship at the same time. So whatever vocational experience or industry disciplines that I was learning, news writing, copywriting, proofreading, media law, copyright, defamation, libel, public affairs for central government, local government, all of this stuff that I was being taught as part of the postgrad, I had to put that into action whilst doing the course. So that's when I landed a trainee reporter's position in my local newspaper, Bedfordshire on Sunday, whose sister company or sister title was Luton on Sunday. So I ended up working for my local newspaper. It was fantastic. Big up to my editor, Chris Gill and Steve Lau, who showed me the ropes, taught me everything that I know in terms of copywriting and proofing and getting, converting a boring, mundane press release into a story. Very difficult task. I mean, imagine that. You're in the office. You've just received a dozen press releases, one from the police, one from the local council, one's to do with council tax, one's to do with potholes, really boring, mundane things. And you have to now convert that into a story. You have to ring around and get quotes, and you have to find out what angle can you choose that will give you the edge over the competing newspaper across the road, who was Times and Citizens in Bedford. So that's how I got into journalism. I did my NCTJ accredited course. And once I started, I was like, hey, I like this. I like this. I like writing stories. I like telling people's accounts. I like giving my take on these events. As much as the excitement about a cat being stuck on a tree or an elderly marathon for cancer, there's only so much excitement you can get from that. But it was a challenge for me to get out of these boring stories some angle, some unique perspective that will give me an edge against my competitors. So I enjoyed journalism. I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed explaining. I enjoyed investigating. I enjoyed interviewing. And I must also say, and I rarely say this, there's a job satisfaction that people get from different careers and different positions. It differs from nurses to doctors to surgeons to lawyers, and it differs with journalists. With journalists, it isn't necessarily about salary. It's not necessarily about money. Of course, if you have those things, it's fantastic. But it's the maqam that you get. It's the status that you get. Yeah. It's the aura that surrounds a journalist when he or she's in the room. People know that they have to be wary about what they say, how they say in your presence. They don't know what's being recorded, what's not being recorded. There is a sense of, I'm trying to find the correct word without it coming across something that's not good. I just liked the vibe which journalists brought with them. In an environment, in a press conference, in a meeting. Oh, that's Dilly Hussain from Beds on Sunday. Better watch what he's saying. Oh, that's Dilly from 5 Pillars. I remember when Dr. Salman Butt from Islam 21C was having his landmark case against the Home Office. And there was the press box in the Royal Court of Justice. There was a journalist from the Telegraph and there was a journalist from the Times. When I walked in, I literally heard them whisper my name. And that has... There's no amount of salary that can fill that in. So yeah, I liked that energy. I liked the status that journalists had and good journalists had when they were doing their job and doing it professionally.
What do you think of Mehdi Hasan?
I think Mehdi Hasan is one of the, if not the most competent, articulate and mesmerizing narrator and orator that we have in terms of like Muslim pundits and Muslim media figures. I don't think anyone necessarily even comes close to him. But do I rate his journalism? No, because not even Mehdi Hasan claims that he himself is a journalist who's worked on the field. The editor-in-chief of 5 Pillars, Roshan Muhammad Saleh, worked alongside Mehdi Hasan at Granada TV in their younger years. Roshan Muhammad Saleh has been to... He covered the Libyan uprising. He covered the Egyptian revolution. He covered the Hezbollah-Israel war in 2006. He covered the Iraq war. He covered Yemen. He's been to so many war zones and conflict zones. Can Mehdi Hasan say that? He can't, because that's not his field of journalism. But is Mehdi Hasan one of the best interviewers, probers, and debaters? He absolutely is. And I have no skin off my nose acknowledging that. And I also give credit to Mehdi Hasan for being the one who brought me into Huffington Post UK. In 2014, when ISIS made the claim that they had established their fake caliphate, Mehdi Hasan wrote a piece on Huffington Post. He was the editor at the time, where he basically said, look, there is no such thing as an Islamic state and there's no such thing as a caliphate and da-da-da-da-da. I messaged him on Twitter. I said, Mehdi, you are a Shia and you have your own position with regards to Islamic polity. You believe in an imamate, and therefore I don't know the nuances that you have pertaining to this subject matter, but you can't speak on behalf of the vast majority of Muslims when you are literally a minority within a minority. I said it to him respectfully, and he invited me to do a rebuttal on Huffington Post, and that opened the doors for me becoming a regular contributor for Huffington Post UK. I haven't written for them in 7 years. Also, I don't think they were so favourable about some of my political and religious positions, so we kind of just ended it there. But for good 4 or 5 years, the Huffington Post platform, I have to give thanks to Mehdi Hassan, who allowed me to basically rebut him on a publication that he was the editor of, and I will never forget that. He is the most talented, competent orator, narrator, debater and interviewer, but I don't rate him as a journalist.
Piers Morgan.
Piece of shit.
Ya Allah.
Yeah.
Are you going to get done for it? Like,
no, he's an obnoxious, arrogant grifter. I say this because whilst on platform he's very courteous and respectful, because he has to be, he's actually a nasty piece of work in terms of his actual views. Lest we forget that this is a man who has made a lot of money and a lot of growth on the back of the Gaza genocide, to the extent that he was even saying on X, look guys, since October the 7th, we've seen huge growth on Talk TV. We've seen huge growth, X, Y, Z. He's literally telling us that I'm bringing on all these different guests, Low-Key, Hijab, Andrew Tate, Dilly, forgot the guy's, his American lawyer friend who was the defense lawyer of...
You know,
the one
where
that
hijab...
yeah, the one that hijab completely finished off.
Oh
his
my
name.
God.
But, you know, bringing in Finkelstein, bringing in Douglas Murray, bringing in all the plethora of contributors on this subject matter, was applying a completely different policy to those who are pro-Israel, or even those who are anti-Israel but are white non-Muslims. And then he'd have a complete different approach to brown Muslims. Whether you're Arab or South Asian, if you were brown and you were Muslim and you're pro-Palestine, he had a complete different approach to you. But even with the likes of Finkelstein, he'd give them more time, he'd give them more, you know, to engage with them. Because in his head, he has a hierarchy. And that hierarchy is based on race, I believe, my opinion, that is based on race and political ideology. Lest we forget that I've had engagements with Piers Morgan before. My first debate with him was in 2019 over the LGBTQ education in primary schools and the parents in Birmingham protesting. And it came out of his mouth naturally. Why are these parents protesting as if they think it's Islamabad? He was only inches away. If they had their way, a lot of these guys would probably just say Pakis and curry munchers. If they had their way. If they had an opportunity.
That bad?
I believe
As
so.
a journalist?
I believe so. In their heart, I believe what they conceal in their heart is worse than what they show in person. In my debate with Piers Morgan with regards to October the 7th, I asked him basically that whether he believes in the right of Palestinians to, you know, resist and defend themselves. He never answered that question straight. He never answered it straight. But when the cameras were off, I asked him, do you believe in a Palestinian child's right to pick up a rock towards an Israeli tank that's going to demolish and bomb his home and kill his family? He goes, no, I don't. He does not believe in the right
Off camera, he said that.
Yes. He can sue me if he wishes. I've said it multiple times. He told me he does not believe in the right for Palestinians to resort to any violence as a form of resistance when it's enshrined in international law, when it's enshrined in Islamic law. He does not believe in the right of a Palestinian father to defend his family and his property against Israeli aggression. This is the kind of guy you're dealing with. So if you're asking me, do I rate him as a journalist? No. Do I rate him as a human being? No. Do I rate him for anything? No. Can he be rated for the way he's grifted? Yeah. But do we really want to be a people who rate grifters? No. He has built a huge following than what he already had on the back of the Gaza genocide. And he thinks he's given everyone an opportunity to speak, but he has completely different policies to how he deals with hijab, Low-Key, Dilly, Abdul Wahid, anyone else, and he'll have a complete different policy with Israeli officials, with Douglas Murray, with the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Durkovic, his friend Durkovic, that hijab demolished. You know, or like even Rabbi Shmuley.
Oh my
Rabbi
God, that
Shmuley,
one was
to
so
begin with, enjoyed a lot of privileges from Piers Morgan, but even he became indefensible. So Piers Morgan is not someone who I rate. He is someone who believes that any Muslim woman that converts to Islam basically wants to be oppressed. He is a man who refused to apologize to Muslim women for describing them as oppressed, especially those who converted. He refused to call what's happening in Gaza a genocide unless 1 million Palestinians were killed. That's his most recent statement. That for him to call it a genocide, 1 million Palestinians would have to be killed. I don't rate Piers Morgan.
You know, so I look at his other guests and other episodes. They don't do so well. Only when it comes to Muslim guests, like Dilly Hussain guest as a guest, Hijab as a guest, Low Key as a guest. Like, bro, they make all the money probably from the Muslim, and they pretend like they're doing us a favor. Oh, we're giving opportunity for Muslims to represent themselves.
No. I mean, look, there was a whole context when I went on, because there was a whole discussion about whether Muslims should be boycotting the show. And I went on there to discuss.
He was so scared when you said that.
Yeah. I mean that you know, he started getting all edgy and uptight about it, and I stuck it on him. So look, the point here is I believe in strategic engagement. I don't believe in being part of a circus show. If you're outnumbered and you're not confident in yourself to carry the views and the positions of the community or the faith or a particular cause, in this case Palestine, then you shouldn't engage in those platforms. But if you think that you can carry yourself, you are somewhat seasoned, you will make mistakes. And every time you look over an interview, you could always do better. But Piers Morgan became someone very quickly, unashamedly, someone who would apply one strategy with pro-Israeli commentators and contributors and Muslim pro-Palestine contributors. Non-Muslim pro-Palestine contributors would even be given a different treatment. But he has a complete different strategy which he employs to brown, non-white Muslims who are pro-Palestine. And that had to get called out. But just before we kind of move on from Piers Morgan, just a week ago, he said, for me to call this a genocide, 1 million Palestinians would have to be killed. That just shows the kind of person he is, bro.
Does he do this on purpose, or does he actually believe in what he does, or is he being told what to say?
We wouldn't know, but we would know that obviously he is part of the Murdoch fraternity. And there must be an editorial line that everyone has to toe. But I'm sure he's given far more flexibility to at least give the veneer of impartiality and objectivity. Whether he's literally being fed things to go and do, we will never know. But you don't have to be fed things. It could just be his views. Yeah. People don't always have to be fed things. People can, you know, put together their own views. And Piers Morgan has many horrible, disgusting views.
So tell me one thing. Obviously, you're a journalist, and I think you can clarify this for me. How does this media work? When a news comes out, how is it that everyone says the same thing? Every news publication or organization has similar narrative. How does that work? Is there a grid or something that controls the entire narrative, or what is it?
No, so basically you have like news providers like Associated Press and Reuters. They would basically send out news memos and updates to all the broadcasters. Of course, they will also have their respective journalists on the field as well. So BBC would have a Middle East correspondent, they'd have a Palestine correspondent, they'll have an Egypt correspondent, they have a Syria correspondent. But what happens is that Associated Press and or Reuters will provide and basically pump out news updates via their portals, which they have to subscribe to. And it's a very, very expensive subscription. And yeah, they basically feed you the news, and then it is on the broadcasters and the print journalists to now flesh out the story. It is now on them to choose their respective angle according to their editorial policy. Who are they going to contact for a quote? Who are they going to contact for the other side? That's on them. But the actual core information is fed out from either Reuters or Associated Press, which is then supplemented by the correspondence that these outlets may have on the ground.
So where does the bias come from? Is it the organization that is publishing the content themselves, or does Associated Press or Reuters, they have some sort of, bias when they publish the, information.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at a very recent example related to Bangladesh. You're aware of the lawyer barrister that was killed by a Hindutva mob?
Yeah.
Reuters or Associated Press, one of the two. I think it was Reuters, but it could have been Associated Press. They completely gave out fake news. They said that the lawyer was defending the Hindutva ISKCON leader that had been arrested, but that was completely untrue. And then the world's media picked that up and they ran with it. So as a result of that one mistake that Reuters and AP did, the rest of the global press, especially the Indian press, ran with that error. They then corrected the error after the interim government applied pressure, but by that time it's too late. Where does the spin and the masala come from? I would say from the editors of those respective publications and broadcast channels. Reuters and Associated Press have basically direct comms with governments, government ministries, so they tend to get the information out very quick, including quotations and quotes and stuff like that. It is then on the publications, whether it's a newspaper or a channel, to then choose their angle, choose their, there's a word for it which I'm looking for, it's actually a very newsy term, to choose their slant, choose their news angle. It's on them. And they will now, if you're a left-leaning newspaper, if anything exists, Guardian and the Independent claim to be centre-left. So they will now take a story and think, right, who do we contact for a quote? What type of language would we use? That's something also very important. For example, it's very rare to find in the Telegraph or GB News occupied Palestine. Like that doesn't exist in their vocab when it comes to news. Whereas you may occasionally see it in the Guardian, occupied territories. So these things are very important. You'll find some will just call any and every Palestinian faction Islamists. You'll find others who'll put Islamists in brackets. You'll find others who won't even put that bracket, won't even use that word. So they differ in terms of the coinage of the terms and words, which is a reflection of their ideology.
Does it make a difference, those terms?
Of course it does. Of course it does. If you tell people that the Palestinian resistance are Islamists, then already they've made up in their mind that these are basically terrorists. They're basically Al-Qaeda, basically ISIS.
Is that what it means, Islamist? Or
No,
what's the definition of an Islamist? What is an Islamist?
An Islamist is a Muslim individual or group who believes that Islam should play a role in governance and in the public life. Does that sound like a practicing Muslim to you?
Does that sound like a practicing Muslim? Like,
that's a very normal Muslim belief, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're a devout Muslim, you'd naturally want Islam to play...
So we're all Islamists.
Basically, that's what it is. Whereas they would try counter by saying, no. Islamists are like a distinct different group of extremists and radicals, but the moderate good Muslims, they don't believe in this. No, I disagree, because if you speak to the average Muslim who truly believes in Islam, and you say to him, do you think that Islam should have a say or influence in how we govern ourselves, how morality is shaped in society, values, education? Most will say yes. So does that mean they're Islamists? So yeah, an Islamist is basically someone who believes that Islam should play a role, a big role or a limited role, but a role in governance and the public life.
Understood. Because a lot of people hear the word Islamist, but they don't really understand. Well, until very recently, I didn't understand what Islamist was. So back to, you were saying every Palestinian is a Islamist, and the coinage of terms, the
coinage of terms are very important, because if you frame it as Islamist resistance group or Islamist radicals, Islamist Palestinian fighters, already they've made a picture in their mind of what that represents, and it's all linked to the 2 decades of brainwashing they've had from the war on terror. And then again, if you refer to them as a resistance group, what you're then framing it as is that irrespective of where they fall ideologically, they have a right to resist under international law. So people who consume that news will see the Palestinian fighters as differently. This is just an example, by the way. I can give you many examples. For example, even the Syrian rebels. Some will refer to them as just Syrian rebels. Some will refer to them as Islamist rebels. Some of them will refer to them as revolutionaries. It all depends on the newspaper, the editor, the channel, and where they position themselves on that specific conflict. And language matters, because language is a vehicle to meaning. And language especially shapes people's notions and views of current affairs and events. So it's very important.
Language is very important. I mean, one terminology or word that I have trouble with is civilian. The word civilian, when they say civilian and innocent, like what's the correct terminology for people that are getting killed and massacred in, say, in places like Palestine, Syria, Iraq, wherever it may be?
Yeah, civilians would be the correct term, and innocent people would be the correct term. The bigger issue is when the likes of BBC chooses to use the word kill and died. Palestinians just seem to die. And they rarely highlight who did the dying part. Like, how did they die? Under what circumstances did they die? And who killed them?
So there's no killer. They
There's
just killed
very
and
rarely.
died.
Unless there's a huge protest and uproar online, then they'll correct it. But when it comes to Israel, whether it's a baby killing genocidal IDF soldier, he's killed. And he's harmonized and humanized. And the British public are expected to mourn for him. When this guy was literally pressing buttons, killing children. Literally decimating entire towns and villages. Hospitals, men, women and children, journalists, aid workers, teachers. But he is killed. But the Palestinian child just dies. So that's more important. We can look into who is a civilian and who isn't a civilian. My bigger contention is the usage of the word of dying and killing. And rarely do you find it. Even now, 14 months into a genocide, you will still find BBC headlines, Sky News headlines, where a 4-year-old Palestinian girl shot in West Bank is described as a woman. How? How did that even become something acceptable to broadcast? That a 4-year-old Palestinian girl shot dead by Israeli settlers, she described her as a woman. Now, whether that's a slip of the mouth, where was the correction? The damage is already done. But it shows a pre-framed mindset of how they see Palestinians, Arabs and Muslims. That's the reality. The reality is that the mainstream legacy corporate media does not see Arabs, Muslims and Palestinians as even humans. They see us as subhumans. Even that, they treat their dogs better than this dignity and the sanctity of the life of the Muslims. Let's be frank about it. We saw it in 2021 when the US-led forces were leaving Afghanistan, that they were more concerned about getting dogs out of kennels than helping Afghans trying to escape. So the bigger concern and the thing that we need to highlight more is the dehumanizing language that the mainstream media and the corporate legacy media applies to Muslims, Arabs and Palestinians, and by extension, immigrants and non-whites. That's what's concerning. Our people dying in the river in the Mediterranean are just numbers and stats. What they're escaping from is not even a priority. We are just hordes of uncivilized people that are coming to take over Europe and are becoming leeches and parasites on their economies. Lest they forget the situation and the context behind why these people are escaping. Why is there a high number of refugees from and migrants from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Syria? Let's look at those 4 countries. What do those 4 countries have in common? War, sanctions, destabilization. So when you ask why are they coming to our shores, why are they coming in their droves, why are they leaving their Sharia shitholes and all this kind of stuff, all the typical right-wing stuff that you hear, have you understood what happened in Iraq? Did you understand how many people were killed in Iraq? Did you ask how life was in Iraq before the invasion? Same with Afghanistan, same with Syria? No. You just think that people are coming in boats because they want to live in your hotels. Trust me, most of the people coming here, even the young, able-bodied men that don't necessarily have to come here, they're not coming for your freedoms. They're coming for economic prosperity. They're coming because those opportunities don't exist in their motherlands. So when media uses language like Palestinians just die, but Israelis are killed. A Palestinian girl somehow is a woman, but an 18-year-old Israeli soldier is a teen. You can see what's happening
Yeah.
here. You're humanizing one for us to be sympathetic towards genocidal killers, and you basically want us to be desensitized towards the actual children and innocent people that are being killed. That's why language is so important.
So Muslims should be very careful on what they're listening to and analyze every word that they listen to.
I am never, I meet some people, I'm like, brother, I've stopped watching the mainstream media. Brother, I don't watch this anymore. Brother, I only follow 5 pillars. I'm like, don't do that. Watch, consume as much news as possible from as many places as possible, because you need to be well-rounded in understanding different current affairs and incidents and events and how it's being reported. All I ask of brothers and sisters is to apply caution in the language that's used, and as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when a wrongdoer comes to you with news, verify it. Now, we're not even talking about wrongdoers here. A wrongdoer could be a Muslim. We are talking about people who beat the drums of war and made the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan and the bombing of Syria a palatable, justified position. They mandated consent through press coverage. So when you take news from them, absolutely take it with caution. Don't stop listening to them. You have to listen to them, because if you don't listen to what the BBC, Sky News, Legacy Media, GB News, Talk TV, if you don't follow what they're saying, you don't understand how your community, how your faith, how your ummah is being reported about. You can't bury your head in the sand. So you should follow these news. Just apply a lot of caution in the language and the framings that they apply.
These people, I heard Piers Morgan say all the time, October the 7th, raped, this, that. How can someone attack someone and rape at the same time? How does that work?
Look, as far as my research has shown, and I think this echoes what the UN has said, that there is still proof and evidence that has to be established about penetrative rape that took place on October the 7th. Penetrative rape is different to sexual assault. Now, I've not assessed or seen any evidence to prove or suggest that the Palestinian fighters that carried out Al-Aqsa Tufan or Al-Aqsa Storm, that they carried out penetrative sexual crimes. So that is still open to debate. But let's put that aside. Why haven't we addressed the 40 babies that were beheaded? Or any children that were beheaded? The point of the matter is no children were beheaded. The point of the matter is that only 2 children died. One died from crossfire. Another one died because a missile or a rocket attacked their home. But do you remember when they ran with the 40 beheaded stories? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Biden ran with it. Sunak ran with it. The British press ran with it. Everyone ran with it. Everyone ran with the fact that Hamas and the Palestinian fighters beheaded 40 babies. Then there was another story that these babies were cooked in ovens. There was another story that Israeli women's breasts were cut off and the Palestinian fighters were playing football with them. They ran with these stories. And what was that? That's basically manufacturing consent for a genocide. You dehumanize a people that bad, whatever Israel does, you're going to support it. Right? Do you understand how it works?
Yeah.
So if you tell the world that these are a people who chopped the breasts of Israeli women and played football with it, they cooked Israeli babies in ovens and they beheaded 40 babies, quite frankly, you don't care what Israel's going to do in response, correct? But none of that was true. None of that was true. What is true is that Israel beheaded babies and continues to decapitate children with its bombs. What is true that Israel cooks people alive from its airstrikes. What is true is that IDF soldiers are so sexually depraved and perverted that they will go into the homes of Palestinian women and wear their nightwear and wear their lingerie and mock the deceased and the displaced. So every Israeli claim is a confession. Every Israeli lie is an admission to what they do. The Palestinians, whatever you think of the groups that were involved or not, and of course we must state from the onset that Hamas and PIJ are a listed terrorist group under UK law. But the 40 beheaded babies, the babies cooked in ovens, the women's breasts that were cut off and this and that, none of that happened. None of that happened. None of that happened. Wow. In fact, Israel did all of that. Every Israeli claim or lie is a confession of what they do and continue to do.
Absolutely, mashallah. This was a monologue and a half for sure. Thank you. Very, very enlightening for sure. Now, I want to move forward slightly.
Sure.
You interviewed some figures,
Yes.
Jada Franson, Nick Griffin.
Yeah.
What was the strategy? What was the logic behind inviting those guests?
So yeah, I had like this short period where I hosted Christian nationalists. So Jada Franson, Nick Griffin, Jim Dawson, and Mark Collette. And my reasoning behind this were twofold. Number one, they were espousing views that were anti-Israel at a critical time where the Israeli lobby was appealing to the white British public to basically support Israel's genocide in Gaza. When I saw certain voices speaking out against this, but also speaking out against it from their standpoint of faith. So there's different type of nationalists. For viewers and listeners, you get Christian nationalists, you get ethno-nationalists, you get civic nationalists, you get pan-Christian nationalists, you get pan-European nationalists. Christian nationalists are basically those who understand their ideology of nationalism from the standpoint of Christianity. I believe all these nationalisms are weak. I think they are shallow ideologies, and I believe they will bring nothing meaningful to Europe's elevation as a civilization, as a society. But it is from their urf, it is from their tradition. My thinking behind that was twofold. Number one, here we have popular right-wing or far-right figures that do have influence, that are quite notorious, but they are ultimately advocating for the Palestinians here. They are basically calling out Israel for what they are doing. If the general white British public will not listen to what Dilly has to say, because they've written me off from the get-go, you're a Muslim, you're an Islamist, you're a Hamas supporter, whatever, we're not going to listen to a word you're saying, you're doing taqiyya. Okay, fine, no problem. But they listen to Jada, they will listen to Nick, they will listen to Mark Collette, they will listen to Jim Dawson, they will listen to other white non-Muslim figures, because sometimes it's not even what you're saying, it's who's saying it.
Yeah.
That matters. So that was one thinking. Second thinking, and I make no secret about this, was to divide the ranks of the white nationalists. Because the white nationalists, there are two strands, pro-Israel, anti-Israel. And I wanted to amplify the voice of the anti-Israel nationalists. Even though these people hate Islam, they hate Muslims, they hate immigration. But at least with the anti-Israel nationalists, there could be some reasoned discussion as to why there is immigration in the first place. At least there could be a discussion in the first place behind the global agenda to destabilize the Muslim majority world and the knock-on effect it has on Europe. You can have that conversation with the dissident Christian anti-Israel nationalists. But with the civic nationalists, the pro-Israel nationalists, it's far difficult to have that conversation. And who do I mean by that side? UKIP, Reform, GB News, Talk TV, Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, these guys. These guys are ardent Zionists, ardent pro-Israel. Israel can do no wrong, and everything that's brown, Arab, or Muslim and non-white is a problem. Whereas with the Christian nationalists and the anti-Zionist nationalists, who equally do not like Islam, who equally do not like Muslims, at least there can be a reasoned discussion about why we find ourselves in the situation that we do in the West, in terms of Muslim migration, in terms of the decay in their own European values, as well as foreign wars. But the problem with the Christian nationalists is that they all seem to be supporters of Iran and Russia and Bashar al-Assad. And so yeah, it's a plethora of diversity of views, but my thinking was to amplify those views that would help expose Israel for the genocide that they were carrying out. It was never meant with the intention that they are allies or long-term friends of the Muslim community. Because Nick Griffin, Jada Franson, Mark Collette, less so, Jim Dawson, they all have a lot to answer for the harms that they brought the Muslim community, especially Nick Griffin. But I posited those things. I gave him an opportunity to apologize, to reflect on his previous mistakes, which he acknowledged. Most of it he did, as did Jada. They never budged on their dislike for Islam, but they did budge on the strategy and the priorities which they placed. And I think that since they've become more Christian, they see things less materially. So Mark Collette, who's an ethno-nationalist, is not necessarily a Christian. His understanding of current affairs was very different to that of Nick Griffin, Jim Dawson and Jada, who were devout Christians. Jada, in her case, was very devout. And it's a very different Jada to the past. Still dislikes Islam, still believes it's a fake religion, still believes that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a false prophet. But she at least respects our commitment to our religion. She at least respects the traditional and conservative values that we espouse. Whereas with the other nationalists who are pro-Israel, if they could just click a button and annihilate us, they would do it. They won't say it, but they would do it. They were the ones that were essentially behind the race riots that we had this summer in the wake of the Southport killings. It was all this camp. And the other camp were the ones that were saying, no, this is a plot. This is exactly what the Zionists want. They want to turn communities against each other, so we focus less on the Middle East and the Gaza genocide. So that was my thinking behind hosting them.
You spoke to Nick Griffin, I believe, in this studio.
Just there.
Yeah. What was the vibe? What was the energy you were getting from him?
He seemed genuine from the perspective that he's acknowledged that certain strategies that he may have employed in the past during his days as the BNP, he could have done those things better or avoided it as a whole. He understands that there is a far bigger game at play, and therefore the conversation that took place was necessary. But he also understood that he's not going to be given an easy ride. You have caused harm upon the Muslims, especially during the race riots in Bradford and Oldham. Whether he claims that he didn't play a part in that or not, many believe that he did. Many of our uncles and aunts that were attacked in the Midlands and the North and were victims of Paki bashing, he has a hand to play in that. So there was that awkwardness, no doubt, and I had to stick it on him, and I had to give him some home truths. And once we got over those hurdles, the conversation just took place naturally. Did I see him as an enemy sitting there? No, because I think it's a very harsh term to call someone your enemy. It's a strong term to say you hate someone or hate something. Even though in Islam we have the concept of loving and hating for the sake of Allah. I just saw this as someone who was once the poster boy for the British far right for many years. He is a name and a figure that will resonate with a particular generation, and it was important to have that conversation. There was awkwardness to begin with, but the conversation just kind of flowed thereafter.
So did he never have any conversation with other Muslim figures like yourself, or were you the first person that he spoke to?
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that he's kind of spoken to in terms of any kind of prominent platform. Even after my podcast with him, others didn't necessarily invite him. But then that's also boils down to other Muslim podcasters and content creators and YouTubers or news outlets. It's whether they think that they could manage someone like Nick Griffin, whether they could have the conversation that I did. I'm saying this with humility, that anyone can invite anyone onto their show. But the type of conversation that takes place boils down to the host himself or herself. And if you're not confident in that, then there's no point hosting someone like Nick Griffin.
What were you thinking before he arrived in the studio? What was your feeling like? What were your emotional feeling?
That if this went wrong, if it goes sideways and I give him a softball interview, I'll have a lot to be held accountable for and to answer for to my community. Just because he's saying a few right things on Gaza and Palestine doesn't mean that this guy's some new ally of ours. He has done more harm, way more harm, incomparably more harm to Muslims and people of color than he has in the last 14 months speaking out against Israel for Palestinians. So there had to be that balancing act, that it couldn't be a softball interview. It couldn't be me presenting him as an ally of the community. And that if this goes wrong, there'll be many people that will hold me and Five Pillars to account. So there was that concern.
Just to clarify, Jada and Nick, are they part of the same club, or do they differ in their opinions and views?
They are currently part of the same club, and that's basically the Knights Templars. They are born again Christians, and they are part of the same camp. Yeah, so they're part of the Knights Templars Foundation. They're part of the same camp. Mark Collette of Patriotic Alternative is not. He's part of a different gang, which is ethno-nationalists.
Okay, let's move forward. Now, 2024, I mean, I've been listening to one of your podcasts with On the Way to Here, and you mentioned, and obviously you highlighted that there's so much that's happened in 2024. You've had so many revolutions, and, you know, I guess some will say overthrow of government. Some people will be happy about it. Some people will be upset about it. I don't know. Where do you think the world is going? Where are we going to go in 2025? Because obviously you've been closely following the geopolitical situation. You've been to Afghanistan, you've been to Bangladesh, you've been to Syria. Are there any similarities? Are there any correlations in what's happening now?
So, what does the year ahead look like, and what do the years ahead look like in terms of global politics? We are seeing the emergence of China as a competing economic superpower. It already kind of is. Russia's always there in the scene. We're seeing emerging alternative powers regionally. Turkey, Iran, up until very recently, obviously they've been given some severe blows. But we're seeing perhaps the beginning of the end of Pax Americana, a world that's dominated entirely by the American world order, a global economy that's pinned on the dollar, that functions via the IMF and World Bank, which enslaves entire nations through loans. We're seeing the emergence of groups like BRICS that are trying to counter the global dominance of the US. But US is still the big daddy. The US still ultimately has a lot of control over most countries because the global economy is pinned on the dollar. And if the global economy is pinned on the dollar, that means they can print as many dollars as they need. They don't need a gold reserve. They don't need any reserve. They are the printers of the global economy. So that's the framing. China is there.
What a fraud that is.
It is. But it's also one of the fitna of not having currency based on gold and silver or something tangible, which is one of the beauty of Islam and the Islamic economic system. But everyone still frames it as we have gold reserves.
No, we don't.
Yes. No, we don't know it. Of course we don't. We know it's not. But everyone still argues it. Yeah. Oh, we have gold reserves.
Yeah, somewhere. It's in Bank of England.
Somewhere we have gold reserves. But your fiat currency is not pinned on that.
Yeah.
You print.
It's our sweat, right? It's our sweat. When we work, we give the tax.
Yes.
This is the currency.
That is the currency. And basically, when the currency is going wrong or sideways and there's inflation, you just print more.
Yeah.
You bail out the bankers who got us into the problem in the first place, and you just print. So long as that system continues, the global order as we know it will continue. That said, there has been some seismic shifts. America was kicked out of Afghanistan after 20 years in 2021. Afghanistan celebrated its third year liberation when I went in August. Bangladesh, Allahu Akbar Wallahi alhamd, removed this tyrant, Sheikh Hussain, after 15 years of a brutal rule. And who led it? It wasn't madrasa students. It wasn't Maulanas. It wasn't Jamaat. It wasn't Hifazat. Students. Students that were Islamic. Students that were secular. Students that were left-leaning. Students that were nationalists. A student movement managed to unify the third largest Muslim country in the world, which Bangladesh is, and managed to, without it becoming a civil war, managed to topple Hasina. And she fled the country like a coward that she is currently in India. Allahu Akbar. It was the most proudest thing for me to be a Bangladeshi. And very rarely do I adopt terminologies that gives me pride from a nationalistic point of view. Honestly, anyone who knows me knows that I rarely say these kind of things. But for the first time after a long time in my life, I felt so proud to be of Bangladeshi origin. Anyone who's watching this, leave it in the comments. Do you know of any Muslim majority country in the last 80 years where the students managed to unify a country, topple a dictator with minimal deaths. Of course, 2,000 were martyred. We will never forget that. May Allah accept them as martyrs and grant the highest station in Jannah. They were the sacrifice. But it didn't become a civil war. And we already know now that on her way out, Hasina wanted the Indian military to intervene. Alhamdulillah, that didn't happen. Shoot them. She wanted the army of a foreign country to kill her own people. Alhamdulillah, that didn't happen.
It's funny though, like her nephew is the head of the army, right? Waqaruz Zaman.
Here's a problem.
So how comes he didn't listen to her? I mean, obviously, I don't want him to listen to her, but did she miscalculate by putting this guy in power? Well,
let's make no mistake. The very fact that Hasina was smuggled out of the country was facilitated by the Bangladeshi army.
Yeah.
She should have been put under house arrest and faced justice. Yeah? Maybe someone should have put up on her on the International Crimes Tribunal. The same court that she eliminated political opposition from. Someone should have put her on that trial. But instead, the military facilitated her departure. I am of the position that whilst you can get rid of dictators, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got rid of the regime. Regime is something very different.
Yeah.
Deep state, institutional, embedded within the ministries and the very foundations of what makes the state.
It's in the DNA. I mean, Awami League, all the Awami League supporters that I've met, they are very, very hardcore.
Very high up.
It's in their blood.
Yes. So they need to be purged. I said this to the interim government of Professor Muhammad Yunus. I told his press secretary, Shafiqur, brother Shafiqur Alam. I told all the key student coordinators, Sarjis, Hasnat Abdullah, all the brothers, everyone that I met. I told them, if you do not purge and cleanse Bangladesh of Awami League, of course they've banned Satra League, but if you don't purge the remnants of Hasina's tentacles of control from the ministries, from the institutions, they're just going to be back again under a different facade or a different party or a different coalition. So I repeat, if anyone from the interim government tunes into your podcast, and I know many would because I saw your podcast being advertised in Silla Airport. When I arrived, I was like, hey, when did you start putting adverts up in Silla Airport? I should start doing this. Mashallah.
You can have the slot next year, no problem.
Can we share the slot at least?
No problem.
No, it's a fantastic idea, mashallah. So, you know, I've said this directly to them. I've said this to them even when I've got back, that if you don't get rid of Awami League and its remnants in the state institutions, then they're just going to be back in a different way. And we're already seeing signs of that. We are already seeing certain appointments, certain key figures being put into certain positions that have supported Awami League before, or they supported Shabak before, or they supported the murder and the massacre of Hifazat Islam students in Shapla Square in 2013, or they supported the killing of students during the traffic protests of 2018. Why are these people being given positions? Are you not going to learn from your mistakes? So it's all good and well getting rid of dictators, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting rid of the nizam, the actual system. And Bangladesh has that, whereas Afghanistan and Syria didn't. When Afghanistan got rid of the Americans, they kicked out the Americans, all the Afghans that sided with the Americans also left. When the Syrian rebels recently toppled Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian Arab army collapsed. So they will now assume power over these state institutions. That didn't happen in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, a popular revolution removed the head of the state, and then all the MPs and ministers went running. But there are still people, intellectuals, influencers, businessmen, tycoons that are still pro-Awami, that still are pro-India. And they need to be purged, and they need to be kept far away from any future plans.
Should the same not happen with BNP then? Because there are, I mean, some say they are equally bad, and some say they are less of the bad.
They're less of the bad. I'm of the position that less of the bad. Most certainly, Bangladesh Nationalist Party have also, when they've enjoyed power and ruling over Bangladesh, they too have pursued political opposition. They've also tried censoring. They've also embarked on politically motivated violence. There's no two ways about that. But I am yet to hear of any evidence that Chatra Dal or BNP students raped sisters, embarked in acts of terrorism, tortured people, killed Islamic students and madrasa students. Yes, Badam dison to Satra League, no doubt. No doubt they did what they had to do. But Satra League is unique in their depravity. These are criminal thugs that were part of a mafia that ruled university campuses and local areas with an iron fist. They were involved in extortion, racketeering, rape, weapons, drugs, all types of things. Satra League and Awami League stand out on a league of their own. I'm not saying that BNP are perfect. They are far from perfection. They have also embarked in some level of dhulm when they've been in power. They were the ones that created RAB, Rapid Action Battalion.
Yeah.
But they didn't do what Awami League did. They didn't hold themselves to India so unashamedly.
By the way, on that point of rap, they did eliminate that dakhat, back in the days when you used to travel from Sylhet to Dhaka by road, like you were afraid for your own life. But when rap came, they eliminated all of this.
They eliminated all that, but they also became a force in which the state used to basically take out their opposition.
I mean, Awami League took advantage of that.
What BNP created, Awami League completely weaponized, and then RAB basically became an extension of the Awami League regime, whereby anyone who posed any threat was taken out, and that includes religiously practicing Muslims. And in fact, the biggest victims, and people don't say this enough, the biggest victims in Bangladesh of Hasina's brutality were the religiously conservative Muslims. Whether they were imams, alims, mashayikh, du'at, activists, madrasa students, or even your average Muslim who has a beard and looks practicing, they were the number one targets of the regime.
It's funny how she left, she was walking very fast.
Tyrants always leave. Kazi, they always leave. Look,
I mean, same with Bashar. I mean, I haven't seen him walk off, but...
but he landed in Morocco, and what the beautiful things...
Morocco or Russia?
Sorry, Russia, Moscow. I meant Moscow, not Morocco. I meant Moscow, not Morocco. The thing about dictators and tyrants is that Allah exposes them in the most perfect way. In that right up until the point that their regime will fall, they will give this bravado. And they are willing to literally kill to protect their kursi. But when they are toppled, they leave with their tail between their legs like the cowards that they are. If you are truly Bafordesh, that's what Bashar and Hasina have in common. They ran their countries like it was their dad's private property. But you ran like the cowards that you are. If you were truly a daughter of the nation or the son of the nation, you would face justice. You would face justice, but you know what's going to happen. You know that when you're found guilty of the crimes and the money that you've embezzled, the billions that you've taken from a poor country like Bangladesh to deepen your pockets and your loyalists, you know the only thing that's really waiting for you is the gallows. You're going to get hung. And if the people got hold of Hasina that day, we know what would have happened.
Dilly bhai, so how is it possible that Tariq Rahman, the daughter of Khalida Zia, he's the second richest man in Bangladesh, net worth of $2-something billion?
No doubt there would have been ways in which he accumulated that wealth. I do not know the intricacies of how he's amassed that wealth, but I would highly doubt it that if he wasn't the son of the general and Khalida Zia, that he would have amassed that wealth. But again, I make a very distinct difference between Tariq Rahman and Hasina's son. I do make a difference between the two. There is no doubt that Bangladesh has basically been ruled by a uni-party system, by two political families, the family of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the family of General Zia, right? So we know that is the way Bangladesh has operated, very similar to Pakistan. Obviously, PTI and Imran Khan was a breath of fresh air, but he eventually kind of became a part of the political system. But they were also run by Muslim League, which was the Nawaz Sharif group, and then the Zardari group from PPP. So Bangladesh has a lot of similarities in terms of Pakistani politics, because ultimately it's the politics of the subcontinent post-British colonialism. So there's a lot of similarities. And I'm not here to basically advocate for BNP. Far from it. I'm not going to advocate for any secular party, I'm sorry. I'm not even going to sit here and advocate for Jamaat-e-Islam, actually. But what I will say is that to liken Awami League and Satra League and the Hasina regime to BNP is an unfair comparison. Is the BNP free of any crimes and dhulm? Absolutely not. But can they be likened and compared to the Hasina regime? No, From my analysis and from my understanding, no.
Before we wrap up Bangladesh and move back to BRICS discussion, Dr. Yunus,
Ji.
people are getting impatient. A lot of people are getting impatient, like, why is he not calling an election? And my point is, how is he meant to call an election without any systems, without proper law and order, without frameworks in place? So what are your views? Should he just call an election, or should he wait and, get the house in order a bit and then call for an election?
So those of you who are not understanding what the primary role of the interim government is, it's the following. After Hussain was toppled on August the 5th, along with her ministers and the Montriain and the MPs, most of them scarpered. They ran, they're either in hiding, mainly in India, or they could still be in hiding in Bangladesh, but they went hiding. So there was an immediate collapse of the state. No, the state wasn't functioning in terms of ministries and institutions. Alhamdulillah, considering that Bangladesh did not have an active police force for 5 days, you'd have thought that it could have become a Haiti.
Yeah,
it didn't. Alhamdulillah, people mobilized, they protected temples, they protected mosques, they protected institutions. Yes, there were pockets of violence. Yes, there were opportunists. Yes, there were Awami League loyalists that wanted to cause civil strife and internal problems, and they're still trying to do that. But alhamdulillah, considering that Bangladesh did not have an active police force for 3 to 5 days, nearly a week, any other country would have collapsed. But they didn't. And that shows the goodness of the people of Bangladesh. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Now, what Professor Yunus has done is that he has formed a cabinet of different advisors. The key advisors were part of the anti-discrimination students movement. So Nahid Islam, Mahfuz Alam, I forgot the other brother's name. There's another brother, very handsome, good-looking brother, Asif Mahmood. And then obviously you've got other advisors. You've got the advisor of religious affairs was a former Hifazat senior. I think his name is Ustad Khalid. I forgot his second, Khalid Mahmood, I believe. So there's different advisors. These people are not politicians. They either come from a student background, an NGO background, a faith group, religious group background, and ultimately they are running the affairs of the government as we stand. And there are critical reforms that are needed. And I am someone who wants to see change as well, bro. But there are certain reforms that need to take place. For example, we need to know exactly the number of electorates. How many people in Bangladesh are eligible to vote? Because we know that for years, people were voting on fake names. People were voting on dead people's names. People were casting votes on behalf of people that they had no jurisdiction to do so. There were all these problems. So there needs to be a voter system where we know exactly how many people are voting, who's eligible to vote, and so forth. Very resource heavy. There needs to be reforms to do with the judiciary. Of course, because Bangladesh's judiciary became a tool in which political opposition used to be eliminated. It was weaponized mainly by Awami League, but even the BNP did that as well. So there are key reforms that need to take place. Labour and employment, foreign labour and immigration, national security, electoral reforms, education reforms. These are very important. Why are we expecting from the interim government to do in 4 months what the Hussain regime could not do in 15 years, and quite frankly, we couldn't do as a nation in 50 years since Shadid, since independence? Why are we expecting from the interim government in such a short space of time to deliver the results which we as a nation couldn't do ourselves in half a century?
You know, the people that are wanting the election, are they not pro-BNP? I mean,
Yes.
from what I know, they are pro-BNP.
Yes, so the biggest supporters and callers of the election are BNP, because they know that if there's an election tomorrow, they're winning landslide.
Yeah.
From my understanding, that Jamaat Islam are not calling for an election. Jamaat Islam are actually saying, give the Yunus government as much time as they need. Also, I understand from my engagements with Dr. Shafiqur Rahman, the Amir of Jamaat Islam, who I met in Bangladesh and I met here in the UK, is that we are not in a rush for elections. We need to mobilize, organize, but at the same time, Jamaat will not be held responsible as a scapegoat for any instability in Bangladesh, because we have been targeted for too long. as people who want to instigate and destabilize this country. So we are willing to give the Yunus government as much time as they need to put these reforms in place, whereas BNP, on the other hand, are itching and are getting impatient and are basically saying, who are these... Obviously, it's not coming directly from like Mirza Ghafoor and Mirza Fakhrul Islam and these guys.
Like, what are they going to know? What are they going to do, right?
But like, from there, like on the grassroots, they're like, who the hell are these guys? Who the hell are these Satro? You listen, you've had your Satro revolution, go back to studying. You know,
let the adults deal with it.
Let the adults, let the politicians. No. We need to create a generation of Bangladeshis who feel that they have agency and are stakeholders as well. Because we will not allow, and the Bangladeshis should not allow, and the 2,000 or so that were martyred, that their life was not sacrificed in vain, that this country, our motherland, is treated like some Bafor's property, like it's your dad's private property. If you are so confident in your political support, be patient. If you believe that you're going to win a landslide, then you win a landslide in 6 months. What are you scared about?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So let the reforms take place. Let the electoral reforms take place. Let the voter list be put together. Let certain mechanisms and processes be put in place. Checks and balances. And then inshallah we'll see what the future of Bangladesh holds. But in the same breath, I will also advise the interim government not to take too long.
Yeah.
Because there is no way that they can take 4 years, i.e. finish the term that Awami League should have finished according to their kangaroo elections. All of this was like fake elections. But they can't finish 4 years. So I believe, my hunch is that we will probably see elections and reforms and everything done, dusted in the next 12 to 18 months.
Inshallah. So where do you stand in this whole mix? Like, you're not Jamaati, you're not BNP, you're not Awami League, you're not Ikhwani, you're not HT. What are you? I mean, do you have any sort of do you lean towards anything? Any bias?
Some of the groups that you've mentioned, they have no doubt played an influence in my earlier years. When I wasn't a practicing Muslim and I became a practicing Muslim, there were different groups that had influences in my political positions as well as my religious views. Do I subscribe to one particular group? Absolutely not. I am a Hanafi Muslim, that's a Sunni. But my politics for sure is shaped by the different revivalist groups that are out there. I don't subscribe to one's methodology entirely. I do not believe in the ideology of Ikhwan al-Muslimin or their South Asian counterparts, Jamaati Islam, that the change and the revival that we're seeking is going to be entirely through bottom up and through the ballot box. But I absolutely understand and believe the value and the essential need for that type of politics and da'wah. Nor do I subscribe to the bottom down, which is that forget about all this dawah and activism on the ground. Really, if the big boys don't support the Islamic movements, there's going to be no Islamic change. Yeah, maybe in the previous years, in my younger years, I perhaps espoused those views. Not so much now. I'm more of the position that everyone has a role to play. Ikhwan al-Muslimin has a role to play. Jamaati Islam has a role to play. The brothers who are fighting physically in those places where it's legitimate to fight are playing their role. Those who are working with, engaging with key influentials and Ahl al-Hali wal-Aqd, they have a role to play. The Deobandis have a role to play. The Salafis have a role to play. The Ikhwanis have a role to play. I now describe myself as a pan-Islamic Sunni Muslim. That is what I am.
Some people think you're HT.
They're incorrect.
Incorrect?
Yeah, I've just said that different groups have played different influences in my life.
Okay.
If you are HT...
HT as in Hizb ut-Tahrir, for those people who don't know.
Yeah, which is now obviously a banned group as well under UK law. If you are HT for just believing that Khilafah is an obligation, that the institution of the Caliphate is the best governing model for the Muslims, is that just a view that's exclusive to HT?
No.
Okay. Now, as a result of their activism, during the 90s especially, Khilafah and HT have become synonymous. Or voting is haram and HT have become synonymous. So, if I am HT for espousing views to do with democratic secular elections, to do with the Caliphate, or nationalism, then I guess many of us are HT. But have I ever been a card-carrying member of Hizb ut-Tahrir? Never in my life. Have I ever been in circles and attended their events? Absolutely. As have many non-HT people. In the same way that I've attended Jamaati and IFE events, Ikhwani events, Salafi darses, as much as I've attended many Brelvi and Fultoli events. And they've all contributed in their own shape or form in the evolving and the evolution of my political ideas. But am I a card-carrying member of Hizb ut-Tahrir? No. Firstly, because that would be illegal to do so right now. But secondly, I have never, ever held any position privately, openly, with Hizb ut-Tahrir. But I would be lying if I said that in my earlier teens and my early 20s, as one's navigating through the marketplace of ideas, that no doubt they had an influence in the ideas that they were obviously espousing at the time, as did other groups and movements.
Obviously, man, like, you know, even a conversation can influence. Like maybe me and you are talking and then something might get triggered in your mind and say, you know what, that's true.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't necessarily mean you are.
Exactly.
But yeah, this whole kind of like Dilly's HT, or like, you know, he's like a crypto HT guy. It's a bit old. It's a bit old. It's something that people used to say to me before. But in the same breath, before they became prescribed in the UK, many people know that Hizb ut-Tahrir, depending on which town or city you're from, they would have been from your community. They would have been from someone's relatives or someone's cousin or someone's tribe. Or these weren't strangers that were exported from Mars and placed in there. The brothers who were involved in the 90s dawah, whether you were with the Salafi dawah of Jimas or the IFE dawah or HT, the hot 90s period where there were lots of debates and I know East London was the hub of this era. You know that these were guys that you knew. Some of them were family members. Some of them were guys that you went to college and university with. They weren't strangers. They weren't like exports or agents that came. And naturally, everyone influenced everyone. The Salafis had a huge role in ensuring that we became more aware of Quran and Sunnah and evidences to back up positions. HT had an undeniable role in us becoming more ummatic in our mindset, that we need to start caring about the affairs of the Muslim Ummah. Ikhwan al-Muslimin and IFE and Jamaat and all their variations absolutely played a key role in understanding that Muslims have a unique role in shaping our future destiny in the UK and beyond. Everyone influenced everyone. For anyone to say that one group was entirely successful and the other wasn't, you're being disingenuous.
Yeah. A lot of things are happening in this world, particularly around Middle East. Let's fast forward, say, 5 years. I mean, my logic is to understand something, you can look at the past and try and gauge, you know, what might happen. And this is my view, my position. And Americans have, or British people, not British people, British institutions, American institutions, they have done this time and time again. They've done it in Libya, they've done it in Iraq, they've done it in Afghanistan. Maybe they weren't so successful. They weren't successful, actually. Is the same thing happening in Syria? Are we going to see the same thing happening, say maybe in 5 years' time, where there's a turmoil and there's nothing left in Syria?
Well, let's be clear that 60 to 70% of Syria is already decimated and in rubble and looks like Gaza. And let's also make no mistake that America, primarily, and other Western powers have already been interfering and involved in Syria. But Syria has to be understood from the perspective of a people who lived under a brutal, secular, tyrannical regime for 54 years, ruled by a minority group, the Alawites, ruling over a predominantly Sunni majority country. This was designed by intention by the French colonialists. This was never ever going to end up good. And whether you believe that Arab Spring was a CIA NATO plot for a great reset to replace the old regimes with new regimes, but keeping the American hegemonic systems in place, if you are of that position, fine. But I don't like taking agency away from the Ummah. I don't like making America God. America is the leading superpower, for sure. And they have their tentacles of influence in most countries, especially Muslim countries, especially those countries where there is destabilization, upcoming elections, revolutions, and so forth. But the US is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They plot, Allah plots. They plan, Allah plans. We have seen so many times from history, good things come out of a bad situation. And we've seen bad things come out of a good situation. So I am not this person who believes that either you are on the side of the American imperialists in this kind of regime change agenda for Greater Israel, or you're part of this pro-Russia anti-imperialist brigade where anything Western, anything American is the enemy and is bad, but China and Russia are okay. I don't subscribe to either, and I don't think Muslims should. Have we forgotten that Islam emerged from the Arabian Peninsula whilst there were two competing superpowers already, the Persians in the east and the Byzantine Romans in the west? Historians have repeatedly discussed how crazy the emergence of Islam was from the deserts of Arabia to conquering 2/3 of the known world in the space of 100 years. If these are our descendants, our predecessors, if these are whose legacy we come from, if you as a Pakistani are from the legacy of Muhammad bin Qasim, or if you as a Bangladeshi Siliti are from the lineage of, or from the legacy of Sheikh Shahjalal rahimahullah, really, are you really going to subscribe to this camp or that camp? No, we need Muslims to be far more fluid. America has been involved in Syria. America ultimately cares about the following two things in the Arab world: the preservation and the protection of Israel, and the preservation and the protection of its military bases and the oil trade. Those are the two things that America really cares about. Israel, because it's its 51st state, isn't it? It's like a colonial outpost of America. It's like America in the heart of the Muslim Arab world. And then, of course, the oil. Now, they don't care if a regime is secular or a monarchy or Islamist or this or that. So long as their interests are maintained, preserved, protected and advanced, that's what they care about. Now, there are some who say that the Syrian rebel factions were backed by the US and this was a NATO plan for regime change, yada, yada, yada. Perhaps. Maybe. You don't know that for true and I don't know that for true. You don't know what deals have been made, what assurances have been made. But in my interactions with Ahmad al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who I was in attendance for a 1-hour Q&A with, or my interaction with Ubaida Arnaut, the official spokesman for the Syrian Transitional Government and the head of the political bureau, was that us ourselves of Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, we had no foreign help in Operation Deterring Aggression. Now, the Syrian National Army, the other rebel faction, who are armed and backed by the Turks, no doubt would have had help from the Turks. The the southern rebel factions that came from Der'a, they would have had some help from the UAE and Jordan. So that's no secret. Russia, America, Britain, Hezbollah, Iran, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they were all involved in Syria.
Why? Like, what's happening there? Like, why?
Because Syria
I don't get it.
Syria is geographically, geopolitically, geostrategically, it is the heart of the Middle East. It is the crossroads of civilization. Ultimately, if you control the Levant, you ultimately control the Mediterranean. And it is the key between certain parts of Western Asia, Europe and Africa. It is very important on who controls Syria and the Levant. Okay. That's why. Also, there was so much 4D chess happening. So much 4D chess happening in the sense that Syria was the only land route that Iran had to supply weapons to Hezbollah in Lebanon. When Russia established its bases in 2015 and 16, it was a massive checkmate to American military presence in the Mediterranean. So there were all these things happening. And then there was the drugs trade, the Captagon trade, that Bashar al-Assad basically made Syria a narco-police state. There was drugs coming in and out of Syria during the Assad regime. So there's all these different reasons as to why Syria was a key country which couldn't follow the same course of action that Tunisia did, Egypt did, Libya did, Yemen did, Bahrain did during the Arab Spring. Syria was very unique in that regard. Syria was also very unique in the sense that from the very beginning, the rebel factions and the revolutionaries were unapologetically Islamic. That wasn't the case in Tunisia. That wasn't the case in Egypt. In Egypt, Ikhwan al-Muslimin joined the revolution quite late, actually. They had to be like pushed and encouraged to join. Very similar to Jamaat in Bangladesh. They didn't officially join the uprising, the Monsoon Revolution. Of course, Shibir and the guys were involved, but officially they were not involved and they joined the party quite late. Syria was different. Syria was Islamic from the very get-go. Also, you had the kind of so many foreign fighters coming. You had the Shia fighters from Hezbollah, mercenaries from the Hazara community in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Can you imagine? You have Pakistani Shias fighting in Syria, but you also have Pakistani and Bengalis from Europe fighting as well on the side of rebels. Because Syria has that kind of eschatological end of times prophecies, that the Malhama, the end of wars, Dabik, the coming of Isa alayhi salam, Masjid Amawi and all this kind of stuff, it completely had a different energy and it meant so many different things to different constituencies. That's why Syria was the way it was. Do I believe that the current success of the rebels was an entirely CIA, NATO-led plot? No. Is there any evidence to suggest that it unequivocally was? No. Am I ruling out the possibilities that it could have been? I'm not ruling that out either. But I'm trying to err on the side of caution by saying, let time prevail what happens. We will know sooner or later.
Absolutely.
What deals were made.
Yeah.
We will know sooner or later what assurances were made. We will know sooner or later how the new transitional government deals with Israel and so forth. We will find all of that out in due course. But I am not someone who makes America God. They are not omnipotent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is omnipotent. They plan, Allah plans, and He's the best of planners.
Just imagine, Bashar al-Assad is sitting right here. What would you ask him? What would you say to him? Imagine Bashar al-Assad is sitting right here. What are you going to say to him?
Why did you run away like a coward? Why didn't you face your people? Besides swearing and cursing at him, I would have said to him, if you were truly the lion that your family claims that they are, Assad, you are actually a kalb, you're a dog. And you ran away like a dog. But you should have stayed and faced justice, like your sister Hasina in Bangladesh, and like every other tyrant. Why did you not stay and face justice? That is the question I would have asked. Because there's nothing else to ask someone who has the blood of hundreds and thousands of his own people, or is responsible for chemical attacks against his own people, or is responsible for the likes of Sednaya and mass graves. What am I going to ask this guy? The only thing I can ask him is, why didn't you stay and face the music? That's all I would have asked him.
What do you think his answer would have been? What do you think?
I wouldn't have been given a fair trial. I wouldn't have been given a fair hearing, because this is a Western plot by terrorists to destabilize Syria. That's what he would have said.
Okay. I'm not backing Bashar in any way because I don't know the guy. I mean, all I see is like, so here's my view. I just don't want instability. I mean, we've seen it with Saddam, like, he was a bad guy and, everyone wanted to get rid of him. And then they eventually got rid of him. And then now, okay, no, Saddam was good. He ran the whole country for like $10 million a month. And now look what's happening. Same with Gaddafi, like one of the, I guess, countries that gave so much facilities. Gaddafi was taken out. Now where is Libya? So I just don't want another situation like this where
I agree.
Same thing is happening in Syria.
I
it's
agree.
Destabilized.
But Syria is also very distinctly different to Iraq and Libya in that Iraq had a full-on US-led NATO invasion.
Yeah.
And America made no secret about we're coming to remove Saddam.
Yeah.
In the case of Libya, NATO implemented a no-fly zone. So they officially intervened. Yes, America was bombing ISIS targets and even al-Nusra targets before, but there weren't American boots on the ground like we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan, and nor did we see a NATO fly zone in Libya. So the Syrian revolutionaries did a lot of what they've achieved off their own back. Sure, they received help and funding from different entities, but in essence, it was a movement that was entirely grassroots, had fighters from other parts of the country that came and helped. But I want to add something very important to a point that you made. I agree with you. I am of the thinking that if we have dictators rule over us, and by us I mean Muslims, it is the responsibility of the Muslims to remove or bring change. Yeah. You do not invite kuffar. You do not invite America. You do not invite NATO to remove your dictator. In that case, the dictator is better for you. So I am with you in that. I am of the position that you do not invite foreign armies, especially non-Muslim armies like America and NATO, to come and remove your dictator. It is better you deal with your dictator or live under him until you find a way or an opportunity to bring change. So I am with you on that. But I am also of the opinion that when Muslims get too comfortable and life is too good, like it is in the Gulf countries, change and revival is the last thing in your mind.
Yeah.
So if you want a Muslim world that looks like Dubai, by all means, if that's your vision for the Muslim world, go for it. That's not the vision I have for the Muslim world.
Amazing. I mean, I've learned a lot from Dilly bhai, like, sitting face to face. I do tune into your podcast. I particularly enjoyed your session with Sheikh Imran Hussain, who does a lot of predictions, and he talks a lot about Malhama and Pax Britannica, Americana, and then Judaica. How was your experience with Sheikh Imran Hussain?
When I reached out to him, it was with the invitation and the intention that this is an individual who has a very loyal cultish following. With the Ukraine happening and Gaza happening, no doubt he's going to have lots of theories and views about these events. But also he has held very controversial, heretical, deviant positions. Does he believe in these things? So this was more of an opportunity for him to either clarify that I am not of this position, or I am of this position, or I've changed my position. What then happened was that he was not only of those positions, he tripled down, quadrupled down on many of these positions. Dajjal came to the British Isles. I forgot which hadith it was. It's a very famous hadith where one of the Sahabis saw Dajjal in an island. He believes that island is Britain. He believes that the Orthodox Christians are believers. He does not call them kuffar. He believes that Putin is the best leader. And some say, even though he didn't say it on camera, but apparently he has said that this is basically the Dhul-Qarnayn of our time. So he's held many wacky positions. He denies the Bosnian genocide. He denies the Uyghur cultural genocide. He has a completely crazy take on Syria. He's very sympathetic towards Orthodox Christians. He also has very spurious positions on the preservation of the Quran. So I asked him all these positions as an opportunity for him to either say, this is my position, or this is a lie, or I've changed. He stood by most of his positions. Now, some people said that I set him up. You don't need to set anyone up if they're basically hanging themselves with their own rope and they're standing by it. So,
where did you carry that interview? Did you go and where was that place? It seemed like he's in a bunker or somewhere.
It is basically one of the brothers in Luton. It was a lastminute.com because when he made himself available, Jamal and this studio wasn't available.
Oh, here in the UK it was?
Yeah, it was in the UK.
I thought you went to Trinidad or something.
No. I wasn't that passionate to interview him. It was a studio in Luton that was in the making.
Okay, well, that was very interesting discussion, Dilly bhai. Do you have anything to say to our viewers?
I want to commend you for this project. Whilst I've not watched an episode from start to end, and I don't watch lots of podcasts from start to end, but I'm watching you. And I'm watching the development and the progress that this podcast is making. And I'm glad that if this was done by intention or not, what it initially began as a podcast maybe for Sylheti Bangladeshis, inshallah now will become something that Muslims beyond just that community can watch.
Inshallah.
And I pray for the success of your podcast, and I think it's a very good thing that you're doing, and I think you carry it very well. I think the fact that you rock up to most podcasts looking the way you do, it shows what this project means to you.
Inshallah, I'm very serious. I'm very serious about it.
Alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah, and I wish you all the success.
Let's end with a quick fire, inshallah.
Go on.
Which public figure would you most like to interview? Like, it could be anyone.
I'd like to interview Mehdi Hassan.
Come on, he's your boy, no? Like, just call him
Yeah,
up.
we're not boys. We've never been boys, but I'd like to interview him.
That would be a fun watch, for
Yeah,
sure.
I'd like to interview Mehdi Hassan.
Are you going to go combatant, or is it going to be more inquisitive?
I mean, it can become combatant if we disagree on certain things, and I'm sure there's lots of things we're going to disagree on, but he is someone that I would like to host on my show, and I would like to have him on. But if you're like, oh, come on, someone greater than that and someone bigger than that.
It could be anyone. Anyone.
It used to be Khabib, but getting hold of Khabib isn't that hard anymore. So, no, I maintain it. Mehdi
What about
Hassan.
Trump? No? Elon Musk?
They don't inspire me, bro.
Okay.
There's nothing about Elon Musk or Trump that inspires me to want to interview them. So, yeah, no.
Putin?
Erdogan.
Erdogan?
Yeah, I'd like to
You have a
interview
lot of questions for him, right?
Loads of questions. So Erdogan and Mehdi Hassan. If I had to choose two people to have on my show and I could choose anyone, it'd be Mehdi Hassan and Erdogan.
Okay, amazing, amazing. Which is your favorite country that you've reported from? Obviously, you've been on an international convoy. MashaAllah, you go to different places. Bangladesh, yeah?
It's my motherland.
Motherland. Sileটি মাতি নেই শুদ্ধ মাতি না দেশ বাড়ি কই
Lala Bazar, Faridpur.
ফরিদপুর মাশাআল্লাহ মাশাআল্lah.
Bakri Sharma.
One book that has influenced your way of journalism.
That's a good one. I know this may sound strange, and people may be like, where's the link between journalism and that? But it was the fact that one of the most famous British journalists wrote the book on the said subject, and that is Jeremy Paxman's What Ruling the World Did to the British. Because here you had one of the most prominent British journalists and anchors writing about the history and heritage from an introspective point of view about what ruling the world did to the British. And I admired that. And there were some very, very honest truths, but as well as a lot of glossing over British colonial history. But it influenced who I am as a journalist, because it said what it told me was that there is absolutely nothing wrong with a journalist having a civilizational mindset. Because we're told that as journalists, we have to always remain objective, impartial, just report news, and very rarely share your opinion. Here you have Jeremy Paxman writing an entire book about what ruling the world did to the British. So I admired that. And what it did was, it inspired me, not entirely, but it contributed towards the inspiration that as a Muslim journalist, I can absolutely be civilizational in my mindset. I can absolutely be pan-Islamic in my mindset. No one can say to me that my journalism should only be restricted to Britain or British Muslims.
Very good, very good. I would have asked, how do you unwind after covering intense and controversial topics that bring hate? But how does your family deal with the, I suppose, heat that you probably bring towards your family because of what you do?
Yeah, that's, subhanAllah, my wife, may Allah bless her and preserve her. My parents, may Allah bless and preserve them. They're the three people that worry the most. Dad, mom, wife. Siblings are kind of like, this is your occupational hazard. Yeah, like you chose this life, like you are in our du'as, and of course we'll check in on you. Mm-hmm. But, this is you, But mom and dad worry, and the wife worries a lot. But they also understand that this is something which they have to accept about me. Especially my wife, I said to her that there's an element of you sharing me with the ummah. There's an element of you have to share me with the community. So therefore, there is great ajr in this for you. Know that if anything happens to me whilst doing this type of work, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I die shaheed. Inshallah. If something happened to me in Bangladesh whilst trying to report the truth about Bangladesh to the rest of the world, inshallah, I hope to die the death of the status of a martyr. Same in Syria, same in Afghanistan. Whilst I'm not there in the battlefield, in the trenches, or, going up against the BDR or like RAB or anything, I'm there doing the work, reporting khabar. I see myself as the position of the poets of Arabia during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Hussain bin Thabit radiallahu an, that they too have a very unique and distinct role in the civilizational struggle and revival of our people, and they just know that these things is just part and parcel of who I am. They struggle, they worry. I just told them, be patient, look towards Gaza, and know that these are first world problems that we have. You'll be fine, we'll be fine. Faddal, let's move on.
Last one. How do you deal with challenges? I mean, your job, I'm sure it's not easy. You have to, you travel to Syria, Afghanistan. Are you not afraid? Are you not scared? Like, maybe 10 years down the line, these guys might become enemies to each other. And then like, oh, this Dilly Hussain, like, he came down and, he done interviewing and all of that. And so he's part of it.
I mean, there is that. But look, the challenges that I deal with are mainly and sadly from my own community. I don't care much for what non-Muslims say about me. I do care about the perception they have about Islam and Muslims, because that's a responsibility that's on all of us. But about me as an individual, I care very little about the views of Zionists and Islamophobes and Hindutva and Qadianis and da-da-da-da. I don't care about any of those constituencies. I care about the challenges posed to me for my own community. That, am I doing this job properly? Am I doing it for the correct intentions? Am I doing it for the sake of Allah? Have I done injustice, or have I transgressed upon the rights of my people and my community? This is what I care about, and that is one of the challenges I deal with. Even when it comes to criticisms, the way I take criticisms from non-Muslims is very different to the way I take criticisms from Muslims. And these are some of the challenges I have to deal with. And look, bro, as much as we all try diminishing, fighting, eliminating ego, we all have it. You're smiling because you know it.
Yeah.
You're smiling because you know it. And no matter how religious we are, no matter how prophetic we try to be, no matter how much we want to brand ourselves as Islamic, the ego is there. And if you're a public figure, that ego is there. When people pat you on the back for doing good work, that ego gets boosted. You have to check yourself.
Yeah.
You have to constantly remind yourself that the way Allah has elevated your status, tomorrow can be done. That same status can be there to humiliate you and bring you down.
It's a double-edged sword, man.
Double-edged sword. So that is one of the things that I have to challenge with. I have to remind myself that, brother, Dilly, you did not achieve any of this. Or the budgets that were approved by the editorial board of 5 pillars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this path for you to happen with His permission. Just remember that everything that you're enjoying from a worldly point of view is here today, it could be gone tomorrow. So shukr for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Keep your intentions sincere and always remember why you're doing it. That is how I keep myself calibrated.
Alhamdulillah, that's a very good reminder for me as well. Jazakallah khairan, brother Dilly, for facilitating this conversation on a Boxing Day. I'm sure your wife wants to go shopping or something. Apologies to Babi, if I have intruded in any way, shape or form. So thank you very much.
Barakallah feek.
Assalamu alaikum.